So in this video, I want to give you a few things to think about in terms of the jointer. And that's what this machine is here. Now, this is a stationary floor-mounted jointer, and it's not something that very many beginners begin with. But the benchtop jointer, much smaller, more reasonably priced, portable, storable, that's something that you might want to look at. You can get them for the high 200s and maybe between $300 and $400. The value that a benchtop jointer provides is enormous. This is not going to be a video on everything to do with using a jointer, because you don't need to know that right now. But I just want to show you the value of a benchtop jointer and what you can do with it. Now, I don't have a benchtop jointer anymore. I used to have one, built a lot of furniture for the house, ended up giving that jointer away when I got this one. The techniques, the issues, the approaches are exactly the same, regardless of what kind of jointer you're using. So most beginners end up buying pre-planed lumber. So that's lumber that's already smooth and it's ready to use. The problem is that the edge, so this is the face of a board, this is the edge of a board. The edges of boards, even when they've been planed, at a sawmill somewhere and sold as planed on all four sides and ready to use, the edges are not all that accurate. And now, why does that matter? Well, it matters whenever you have to glue boards together on edge. It also matters a great deal when you're making a face frame for the opening of a cabinet, for instance. And the horizontal members need to join accurately with the vertical members. For instance, if the edge of the vertical member is not square and true, then you're not going to be able to get a very good joint there. So refining the edges of pieces of wood, that's the main use for a jointer. It's not the only use. There's more extensive things you can use it for, but the little benchtop jointers that I'm recommending to you in this course, that's their main use. And I've chosen a board here which is kind of wonky, exceptionally wonky on its edge, just to show you what's going on. So let's take a look. Look at how unsquare that is. That's very unsquare. Not only is it unsquare, but let's see if we can get this on camera. When I look at the board this way, can you see that it's dished? It goes down in the middle. That's actually a fairly common flaw in the edges of boards, and it will cause you some grief if you need to rely on that edge for gluing to another piece of wood on its edge to make a wider piece of wood, or, as I said, face frames on cabinets, stile and rail frames around raised panel doors. Having crisp edges, it's going to help you a lot. It's going to crispen up your work quite a bit too, just overall. So what the jointer does is it planes away wood. And you see here, this is what's called the cutter head. And it revolves. It turns this way at high speed. That's the blade there. And so it removes material from the wood you're jointing. Now this is called a fence. There's a lot of things in woodworking called fences. You remember the router table fence, and I mentioned the table saw fence. Well, this is a jointer fence. And during use, you always, when you're jointing an edge, you always hold the wood tight to the fence. We don't really care what it's doing underneath. We don't want to, that's the way this piece of wood lies naturally. Look, it's tight at the fence. It's tight to the fence at the bottom. But look at all that gap up there at the top. We don't want to let the bed tell us how to hold the wood when we're jointing an edge. We want the fence to dictate that. So during use, you're going to see me doing this. During use, I'm going to be holding this snugly into the fence as I slide it over the spinning blade. In order for that operation to actually bear the kind of fruit we want, the fence needs to be square to the bed. So that's something you want to check. And that's where the machinist square comes in. I've introduced this to you before. Very accurate, and you can rely on this. I would not use any other kind of square for this setup operation. Not the combination square, not any of the other woodworking squares. But look at that. Look at that nice. That fence is adjusted properly. The thing about jointer fences is that sometimes they can have a little twist in them too. They're not necessarily flat along their length. So you really want to check for square at both sides, both ends of the fence. And if there's a problem, you kind of have to split the difference so that there's a little bit of error on one side and a little bit of error on the other. This fence happens to be pretty good. I did work in a fancy shop one time. They had a great big jointer, much bigger than this, but the fence was twisted. So what they did was they used a double-sided tape to put a thin layer of hardwood on the fence. Then they took the fence right off the jointer and they used the jointer to make the wood of the fence flat. That worked really well too. Luckily we don't have to do that here. But I'm going to put on my safety equipment now and just run this board over the jointer, and I'm just going to make one pass. One pass will not fix the wonkiness of this edge, but it will start to. And when it starts to, I want to show it to you so you can see that the jointer takes off more wood where it needs to and less or no wood where it doesn't need to until the edge is perfectly straight and square. My guess is that it might take 3 or 4 passes to refine this edge to the point where we can actually use it. But let's just do the one and we'll see what it looks like. You can see we're starting to impose the kind of order that we want on this piece of wood. Now this should be pretty square up here. It looks pretty good from where I'm standing because you see the jointer started to do its work here, and it happened to do its work right across the width in this case. We go further along and we find that it's jointed less of the width. That makes sense because don't forget this board was cupped, so it should be removing more wood at the ends than it is in the middle, and that's exactly what we're finding. See, we've got full coverage here and not so full coverage there. So I'll continue. I think maybe another couple of passes should fix this, and we'll take a look for squareness and straightness of this edge. Well, clearly that looks a lot better. Let's see how it checks out. That's pretty good. There's a little bit of dirt on here. Yeah, that looks quite good. Square-wise, it's great. Let me take a look here. Oh, and look at how flat that is. See, it's no longer dished like it was before. So there you go. That's the most basic way to use a jointer, and it's probably the way that you will start, and it's the ideal approach for use with a small benchtop jointer.